My question is to Mr. Ankit Gupta. What do you see as the typical problem statement when you interact with customers in the automotive sector?
Thank you. First of all, so just to give you a small heads up, so I am also the president of ASPA, which is the Authentication Solution Providers Association. A lot of people sitting here on this panel, luckily, are happy to see that are members of the association. So for everybody sitting here, you should know that ASPA members are member companies who are dealing with such technologies. So I would sincerely request automotive companies to approach such companies. That's one. In terms of your question, see, everybody acknowledges counterfeiting as an issue now, right? So, and when we compare different industries, because all the players sitting here typically we sell our technologies to multiple industries. One thing I would definitely give automotive industry a hands down on is the maturity, right? The maturity of acknowledging this is a problem. So that problem is already solved here in that sense that they acknowledge this is an issue. Now, the biggest problem is the disintegrated supply chain. Because of the disintegrated supply chain and the temptation of a consumer to source cheap products, to source cheap spare parts or aftermarket products, the complication amplifies. When the complication amplifies, you have to ensure as the brand owner that the right product is available in the supply chain, one. And secondly, the consumer is finally able to get and authenticate the product. So this is where it's happening. The other thing which happens is the whole question around the return on investment or increase in expense. There's a very simple mathematics which I'll request everybody to listen to is if you're a 100 crore top line or let's say a 1,000 crore top line company and 20% of your product is getting counterfeit, which is the average statistic, then you're losing 200 crores of revenue. Out of 200 crores of revenue, even if you're earning 10% bottom line, that's 20 crores of profit right there. The differential cost or the increase in cost may not be even a crore for all you know. So the return on investment question is clearly answered and proven enough number of times for everybody's knowledge.
Thank you. That's exciting to hear in terms of how you're looking at different industries and also with the automotive sector.
I'll just add my perspective here. I've been speaking at different events for the last 15 odd years, right? So it's a journey which the consumers as well as the brands are taking. 15 years back or even 10 years back, brand owners used to walk up to me after a panel like this. Ankit, yaar, tum stage pe kya bol rahe the? Logo ke samne mat bolo, but please send somebody to help us. So this was then. In the last 5 years, as an industry, I think we can say, things have evolved drastically. Okay, and the reason for that to happen are multifold. One is social media awareness. Now the Gen Zs and the Gen X are tweeting about it. Second, technology availability. Technology is finally available at a price point which is affordable for the SKU, not for the brand, for the SKU, because every SKU has to be able to afford that technology eventually. Third is legal angle. So basically consumer empowerment and everything is starting to happen. To give you two specific examples, in the pharmaceutical industry, Mankind Pharma, which is, I think we all know Mankind Pharma, has taken it up as the CSR initiative to create awareness about this. They're working very closely with ASPA as a matter of fact. Right? Similarly, Alchem, which is another pharma company, has given full-page advertisements about what to check. So it's a journey which we all are taking as consumers and brand owners. That first, they were not acknowledging this is an issue. Now brands are willing to acknowledge this is an issue. When they're acknowledging this is an issue, are they willing to talk about it in newspapers or their advertisements, or are they willing to give this topic a certain part of the real estate of the advertising? Right? So if it's let's say a 10-inch by 12, whatever the size of the ad is, are they willing to talk about it in some space? Is the return on investment justified? 110% is justified. I think all of us sitting here can vouch for it. One other thing to what Professor Deepak was talking about in terms of cost, I would just request everybody, all the automotive players sitting here, to not treat this as an L1 procurement strategy. This is not an L1 procurement process. When you're talking about anti-counterfeiting, you want to go with a secure solution. So L1 may not be the best strategy to use. Just keep that in mind. The other thing, I'll just end as a last word, is we always believe in this ek aur ek 11 approach. I think you've heard this in multiple ways in different presentations by everybody here, is that every technology has its pros and cons. So you all have to understand that different pros and cons, every technology ke pros, cons ko you have to augment with the pros of another one, and then create the right solution which works for your product, for your SKU. The other dimension to keep in mind is that if your product is sold more in the rural market versus the urban market, the probability of a scan rate being higher in an urban market logically is higher, versus where we've also heard in our own internal conferences that people in the lubricant space, they say कि यार आप लोग इतनी बड़ी technology की बात करते हो, आज भी मेरा किसान तो bottle की shape से decide करता है, right? So point is that we have to keep that dimension in mind, that what is the consumer be looking at, right? So where would scan work, where would it not work? What is the dimension? What is the different type of technologies? How do you combine it at the right price point?
Maybe towards the end, let's do one round of quick, have a chat with the panel members. So I've seen in Costco's, let's say in the US, I go buy a tire, Michelin, Continental, doesn't matter. Sometimes the OEMs, in that case the tier one, has an offer on the table. You buy the tire, you pay the full price, but then they give you a QR, you scan to get your cash back from them. So it brings the awareness, it puts the responsibility back on the consumers. You have a physical product in the hand, you have a digital ecosystem to go back to where you also get some money back. So there is onus also on the consumer. So I was an urban customer, maybe I had that awareness. I keep hearing about phygital. I'm also interested to understand rural and semi-urban customers or buyers. So question to Ankit, how do you look at this? Is there a way you see, in addition to the urban customers, these customers in the rural and semi-urban can also benefit from some of the upcoming areas like phygital, maybe newer ways of looking at counterfeiting and anti-counterfeiting?
So I've kind of touched upon that, but see, idea is very simple, right? So it's a dimension, it's a two-dimension graph in that sense. There's physical, there's digital, there's urban, there's rural, right? So we're talking about that kind of a graph here. The dimension keeps changing on the basis of where you are physically. If you're in rural, then it'll be a different kind of a problem statement versus in urban. Similarly, the dimension of how much of digitization would work accordingly will change. But one thing which is constant across is incentivization. Incentivization for people to scan works everywhere in the world, right? Be it in India or anywhere abroad. So the second you put some form of scheme for the consumer, not just to authenticate, which can happen in the back end by default for the brand owner and the consumer, but more importantly for them to get something out of it, then the probability of the scan increases for sure. I think that's one thing which we all can vouch for from the experiences we have from different consumers or brand owners we worked with. In case of the auto industry, right? So we depend on the mechanic. We depend on the local shops and the mechanic. The mechanic is somewhere deciding which spare part to use. Now he's deciding where to source the spare part from. He's deciding which spare part to buy on the basis of the loyalty scheme or the scheme potentially running for him or her, right? So that structure, if one looks at that, how do you correctly incentivize the mechanics to use my parts and then genuine parts, obviously for sure, would definitely help. You guys, but basically, as fundamentally, I'll just leave with this thought that ek aur ek 11, it's not just technologies that who has to work together, it is you and us who have to work together. It's not one person's problem, it is our problem, and we have to solve it together.
Yeah, so one suggestion maybe to the organizers, keep a few good parts, keep a few counterfeit parts, see how many can identify, give them free lunch. Thank you, everybody.